Hey everybody, welcome back to another video. So the other day I posted a video about the chatterbait, and the chatterbait is a great springtime bait, and it's a good bait for me to talk to you guys about. That way you can get out there in the spring when the winter's over and you can start catching some fish, or if you're down south you can start using it right now. So today I'm going to be talking about the Senko. If you bass fish at all, you probably know what the Senko is, but it's the kind of bait that will work anywhere. You can catch fish on the opposite side of the world, up north, down south. You can catch them in rivers, lakes, shallow, deep. It doesn't matter. You'll be able to catch bass on a Senko anywhere. So when it comes to fishing a Senko, I got 3 different ways that I like to rig it, and that's wacky rigging it, putting it on a shaky head jig, and then drop shotting with the Senko. So when I'm using the Senko, I'm going to be using a 5-inch Senko, and this is all it is just a little 5-inch stick worm. So I'm usually using the 5-inch ones. Around here that's what works best because we don't have a lot of giant bass, so I feel like the really big Senkos don't catch quite as many fish. They'll still catch bigger bass, but I just always like catching or using the 5-inch Senkos because I've caught 6 and 7 pounders on those before. So let's get into the way I'm going to rig these up. It's going to be a little hard for you to see here, but I just got my little octopus hook here. It's kind of up to you on what size you use, but just use good judgment on what you think would work best. And then you're going to take your worm, you're going to hook it straight through the middle so that it's just hanging off both sides like that. And that is how you wacky rig a Senko. It's pretty simple. Now, what's going to happen when that's sinking down the water, it's going to be straight like that, sinking down. And then when you twitch it, it's going to start making that little action like that. And the 2 sides are just going to flop around like crazy. And that's what bass love. A lot of times you're going to catch fish when it's just sinking. If you can cast that out, if you can tie that on and rig it just like that and cast it out there, you're probably going to catch fish just doing that. But what I like to do, especially in the early springtime, is just barely twitch it, barely move it, and that'll catch fish sometimes when you're bringing it back to the boat. And then in the summertime, you can even just hop it through the water, and that'll really get a good reaction strike out of the fish. So you can almost power fish the Senko. So that right there is the first way, and my favorite way to use a Senko. Now the next way is with the shaky head jig. Now there's a whole bunch of different types of shaky head jigs, but this is what I got tied on for now. I use some different kinds too, but all you're going to do with this is you're going to take your Senko. I got a little whitish, grayish Senko, and the best ones are the ones that have a pointy tip down there and then a flat tip on the other side. So you're going to go stick it in the flat part about 1/4 inch, pop it out the side just like that, and then you're going to slide it all the way up to the head of the jig. Kind of just spin the worm around on the hook, and then you're going to bend it a little bit, and just kind of try your best to make that worm straight. With this hook I got here, it's not the best. If you use like a wider gap hook, it's a little easier to keep the worm straight, but essentially that's what it's going to look like right there. Now you're not going to get quite as many fish on the fall with this because it sinks a lot faster, but you still, if you get it into a spot and it lands down there in the water and it's sitting there, the fish might pick it up off the bottom. And with this, it's gonna hit the bottom, and then the worm is gonna kind of sit up like that and just dance around. So when you get down there on the bottom, you really don't even have to move it around that much. You can kind of just sit there and just barely wiggle it around, and that worm's just gonna kind of barely move and swim around in the water a little bit, but the head of the jig will just stay on the bottom. So that's a great way to get bites. Also, when the fish get more active, you can bounce it through the water, get more of a reaction strike, and it's a great way to catch smallmouth. I've caught some awesome smallmouth on the Mississippi using the shaky head jig. So, the last way that I'm usually going to rig a Senko is drop shotting. So, it's going to be kind of hard for you guys to see once again, but the hook on a drop shot is up there, and then basically the tag end of your line is what you're tying that sinker to, and that's going to be sitting down there on the bottom like so, and your hook is up in the air, up in the water. So all I'm going to do is wacky rig it like I showed you before. Just stick them straight through the side like so. That's what it's going to look like. Now this technique works really good when you're out in a boat, because you can look at electronics and you can get it right on top of some structure out deep and drop it straight down, let that sinker sit there, and you can just hold it right there. And with that thing floating through the water, it's going to give it all the action it even needs. You can kind of bounce it a little bit too, and as you can see, it just goes crazy. But especially when the fish aren't very active, you can just drop it down there and just let it sit, and it'll just float through the water and just kind of barely twitch, and it'll get those fish to bite. If you're fishing from the bank too, it's really no different. All you got to do is just cast out, cast to the structure, or just keep making casts all over, kind of dissect it like slices on a pie. Just throw it out there, let it sink down, and keep your line kind of tight, because if the line's too loose, your Senko is going to sink down too. If your line's tight, your Senko is going to sit just like that. It might be, obviously your weight might be on the bottom and your Senko's off to the side if you're way over here on the bank, but essentially it's still going to be up off the ground and doing what it's supposed to, and then you can kind of just slowly drag it back, let it sit there, slowly drag it back. So that's a really good way to catch fish, especially in the springtime. If you're in deeper water, or if the fish just don't really want to bite, you can just let it sit there, and it's going to stay off the bottom the whole time, as long as you just keep your line kind of tight. So that's the third way I'm using the Senko. So now I'm going to talk just a little bit about the colors that I use and the types of Senkos I use. As you can see here, I got all my Senkos laid out, and I got some Yum Dingers, I got some Strike King, I got the Bass Pro, I got all kinds of different Senkos, basically just because I go to different places and they just have different brands of Senkos. But if I were to recommend any type of Senko to someone, it would definitely be the Bass Pro Shop Senkos, because if you get Yamamoto Senkos, for example, they're going to be like the same price for 8 Senkos as it would be for 16 Bass Pro ones, and it's pretty much the same freaking thing, but the Yamamoto ones are better. Either one that you're using, when you catch 1 or 2 bass on it, that Senko is going to fall, it's going to fling off, or it's going to just be destroyed. One thing that you can help with that is to put O-rings on it, but still, no matter what Senko you're using, if you're catching fish on it, they're gonna break right apart, and you're gonna go through a lot of Senkos when you're catching fish, no matter what kind of Senkos you're using. That way, I just figured if you're gonna be going through a lot of Senkos either way, you might as well just buy a lot of cheaper Senkos, because you can get more of them. So when it comes to colors, you don't really need to get too carried away with colors. I've never really been a big believer in like the hot pinks and lime green, just all the crazy colors, because the bass aren't going to be seeing worms like that. You want to kind of match what the fish are seeing. In the springtime, when things are a little more dead, I'm usually just going to go with dark colors, like this brown color right here, or this brown color with a little bit of a red flake in it. I mean, they're both just very natural looking worms. Or something like this, a green one. Those are all great colors for early on in the season and even later in the season. Once I get later in the season, and depending on the water conditions, I might just play around with colors and see what's working best. I feel like when you're fishing in really green water, like when the algae blooms and stuff like that, if you're using a Senko like this with the white and the green, that works really good. Or also the white and blue, something like that, works awesome. So when you're fishing with these Senkos, there's all different kinds of ways you can use them around different structure. So for example, with a drop shot, you might be fishing out deep on a brush pile or a rock pile or a drop off, something like that, with your drop shot. And then for your shaky head, you might be able to use that in current on a river, because obviously with the weightless worm, it's going to be a lot harder to get that thing to fall down in the water. It's just going to float away. So a lot of times when I'm fishing like out on the main channel on the Mississippi River, I'm going to throw a shaky head jig on, and those are amazing for catching smallmouth. You'll catch some nice largemouth on them too, but it's nice just to kind of have different ways that you can fish a Senko and keep switching it up on them too. And you might be able to catch a bunch of fish one way, and then you switch it up and you'll start catching fish that way too. Now when it comes to the weightless Senko, it's a great way to skip docks. I go up into Minnesota, and there's tons of lakes up there with tons of docks on them, and I have a lot of fun, catch a lot of really, really quality bass up there, a lot of 4, 5, 6, even 7 pounders up there fishing the docks. So you can really fish it around all kinds of different stuff, and I've caught fish using them everywhere. It's just a really versatile bait. I can't say it enough. It's probably my favorite bait all around. I know no matter where I go in the world, I'm going to bring a Senko with me, and I'll have a good chance of catching a fish on it no matter where I go. So these are just a few ways that I'm going to use the Senko. There's more ways out there, obviously, and this is just stuff that works for me. And I fish mainly here in northeast Iowa on the Mississippi River, up in Minnesota, Wisconsin, just kind of in this area. So I don't have a lot of experience fishing down south or Great Lakes, stuff like that. But I do know for a fact that Senkos will work everywhere. I've seen people catch fish on Senkos everywhere. So make sure when you get out there this spring, just have a Senko tied on in one of these 3 ways, and you'll definitely be able to catch some fish no matter where you're fishing at. And be looking for some more videos with all these awesome lures that I use coming out. And don't forget to subscribe to my channel. I'm almost at 100 subscribers, so that's pretty exciting. My channel keeps growing, and I'm pretty excited to get more videos out to you guys and keep on doing this. So hope you learned something today, and be ready for the next one. There will be more. See you guys later.